The day the sky witnessed injustice. The silent strength of Ibrahim Traoré. They tried to humiliate a quiet African man on a plane. What they didn't know, he was the president, and history was watching. This is the story of Ibrahim Traoré, and the moment dignity soared higher than any plane. The sun was just beginning to rise over the airport. The terminal felt quiet, peaceful, and cold. Ibrahim Traoré stood calmly near gate 37. He wasn't dressed in a suit, didn't have bodyguards, and carried nothing flashy. To most travelers passing by, he looked like just another African man heading home. But he was far from ordinary. He was Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso. He chose to travel this way, humble, private, and discreet. No cameras, no announcements. That was his way. He believed in staying connected to the people, blending in, and staying grounded. He had just wrapped up important diplomatic meetings in Europe, discussing matters like gold sovereignty and Africa's future. Now, all he wanted was to get home. Walking toward his Air France flight bound for Ouagadougou, he greeted one of the airport workers in French with a warm bonjour, CAVA. The worker smiled back, unaware of the man's true identity. That's exactly how Ibrahim preferred it. He boarded the plane quietly, nodded politely at the crew, and took his seat in business class, seat 2A, by the window. No one paid much attention, or so he thought. A few rows back, whispers had already started. A senior French businessman, a CEO of a major energy company, was also flying to Burkina Faso. He was accustomed to red carpets, first-class treatment, and champagne. But when he arrived at the gate, the airline informed him that business class was full. The CEO was not used to hearing the word no and refused to accept it. Impatiently tapping his polished shoes, he insisted on being accommodated. To him, being a strategic partner in African projects meant he deserved special treatment. The airline staff scrambled, whispering among themselves and checking their tablets. But the truth was simple. Every business class seat was occupied. Determined, the CEO's pressure forced the airline to act. They summoned Claire, a senior flight attendant, tall, white, and dressed crisply in her Air France uniform. With a cold, forced smile, she boarded the plane to fix the situation. Scanning the cabin sharply, Claire's eyes landed on Ibrahim Traoré, a dark-skinned man in a hoodie, quietly reading something on his phone. She took another look. No flashy watch, no assistant, no obvious signs of power. She leaned to another attendant and whispered, assuming he must be a mistake. Approaching Ibrahim with a tight smile, she politely but firmly asked to see his boarding pass. He handed it over calmly. She checked it, the seat number matched. Yet, something about him didn't sit right with her. To her, he didn't look like someone who belonged there. Moments later, she returned, her fake smile more forced than before. "Sir," she said, "we may need to move you to accommodate another passenger. Would you mind relocating to economy? We will compensate you." It was a quiet but sharp insult. Ibrahim raised an eyebrow and asked, "And why me?" "No reason, sir," she replied, trying to stay composed. "Just a small adjustment for our guest." "A guest more important than me?" he asked, still calm. Claire offered no answer, only a strained smile. Around them, some passengers sensed something was wrong, but said nothing. Ibrahim simply leaned back in his seat and responded firmly, "No, I will remain in my seat." The tension began to thicken. Claire, stunned by his refusal, tried again. "Sir, I insist. It's for operational reasons," she said, her tone colder. Ibrahim didn't flinch. Looking her straight in the eyes, he calmly asked, "If it's operational, please explain why I'm being asked and not someone else." Claire hesitated. She hadn't prepared for such calm resistance. Nearby, other business class passengers lowered newspapers and paused their typing. quietly watching the situation unfold. Still, the CEO hadn't boarded. He was waiting at the gate until a solution was arranged. Claire rushed to the cockpit, whispered urgently to the captain, and returned. This time, she didn't approach Ibrahim. Instead, she targeted another black man in business class. Then another. Only passengers who didn't look the part. It was a clear, unmistakable pattern. Ibrahim sat silently, watching with sharp eyes. The humiliation didn't anger him. It focused him. He observed and listened carefully. Claire approached a young African man, likely in his late 20s. "You, sir, we need you to move to economy," she said. The young man, confused, asked, "Why me?" She didn't answer, just took his boarding pass. That's when Ibrahim stood up. "Enough," he said, his voice steady and commanding. "You're making decisions based on skin color, not tickets. That's called discrimination." Claire, visibly shaken, stammered, "Sir, please sit down. Don't cause a scene." But when Ibrahim locked eyes with her, she faltered. His gaze was steady, fearless, powerful. Yet she still had no idea who he really was. To her, just another passenger causing trouble. Muttering under her breath in French, Claire complained about these people always making noise. Finally, the CEO was brought on board, greeted with exaggerated politeness. Claire handed him champagne, reassured him with smiles, promising this seating issue was being fixed. Meanwhile, Ibrahim quietly buckled his seatbelt, fingers calmly tapping the armrest. He didn't need to argue or reveal who he was. The world would find out soon enough. The CEO strutted through business class like a king, barely glancing at Ibrahim. Claire made sure he was comfortable, pampering him with towels and another glass of champagne. The message was loud and clear. You matter, he does not. The plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the sky, carrying more than passengers. It carried a moment that would soon ripple through two nations. Inside the cabin, everything looked normal. Passengers relaxed, the seatbelt signs blinked off. But beneath the surface, an invisible storm was brewing. Ibrahim stayed calm, like a man watching a movie he already knew the ending to. He didn't complain, didn't make calls, didn't announce his title. He simply waited. Claire, unsettled by his quiet strength, avoided his gaze. Yet mid-flight, she approached again with another fake smile. "Would you like anything to drink, sir?" Ibrahim glanced up. "Water is fine," he said simply. She nodded quickly and left, offering no apology, no courtesy, no respect. Meanwhile, the CEO was treated like royalty, laughing with Claire, basking in her attention. What Claire didn't realize was that the man she had tried to humiliate, the one she saw as just another ordinary passenger, was the leader of a nation. And soon, everyone would know. In the cabin, an African nurse returning to Bobo Dioulasso noticed everything. She shook her head and whispered to her neighbor, "That's our president. They don't even know who they're humiliating." Her neighbor's eyes widened in surprise, but he remained silent. The president clearly wished to remain unnoticed, and no one wanted to break the calm. Hours passed. Most of the passengers were asleep, but Ibrahim Traoré remained awake, watching the clouds through the window. He was not angry. He was patient, and when the plane touched down in Ouagadougou, that patience would make history. As the descent began, the lights came on, and the captain announced the arrival in both French and English. The passengers began to fasten their seat belts as Claire, still smiling at the CO, continued to ignore Ibrahim as if he were invisible. Outside, the view was stunning. A golden sun over red lands, a city awakening beneath their feet. But what the passengers couldn't see yet was the imposing convoy waiting for them. Black vehicles, presidential escorts, and ministers lined up on the runway like statues. A murmur spread across the plane. "Are we landing in a war zone?" asked a nervous foreign passenger. Another replied, No, it must be someone important. The French CO laughed, convinced that all this reception was for him. Claire, amused, was already planning to personally accompany him to the terminal. However, as soon as the plane stopped, everything changed. A tall officer, wearing a black beret, boarded the plane. With a firm stride, he walked down the aisle, observing each face until he stopped at seat 2A. With a solemn gesture, he saluted militarily. "Mr. President, welcome home." Silence took over the cabin. Claire was frozen. Her hands were trembling. Ibrahim Traoré stood up calmly, without needing any words. The CEO, pale, could barely stammer out a "Mr. President." Another officer quickly approached. "You two must come with us," he ordered, referring to Claire and the CEO. She, confused, asked, "Why me?" The officer replied coldly, "For publicly insulting the head of state on national soil." No one wanted to hear their excuses. Meanwhile, outside, the president was welcomed as a hero. Guards, ministers, and a cheering crowd. Claire and the CEO, however, were handcuffed and escorted in silence, their faces marked by humiliation and fear. At the terminal, Ibrahim Traoré gave a brief speech to the press. "In Burkina Faso, we do not measure a man's worth by his appearance. We do not kneel before money or colonial habits. Here, we respect human dignity." His message spread across the world like wildfire. Africa was rising with pride. Claire and the CEO faced charges of discrimination and public offense. Neither diplomatic intervention nor political influence could save them. Ibrahim Traoré made it clear, this is not a colony. This is a sovereign nation. While the airline attempted to manage the damage with empty apologies, the people of Africa celebrated a moment that would be forever etched in history. The day dignity triumphed over prejudice. And Traoré, without seeking revenge or personal retribution, quietly returned to working for his country, leaving behind a powerful lesson. Not all heroes raise their voices. Some simply act. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment, and share this message of dignity and respect. See you next time. God bless you.